Howdy, everyone. Welcome to the Best Bell Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Bradley Stalder. You can follow me on Twitter at FFStalder. This is episode 19, and tonight I will be reviewing and recapping a Best Ball Mania 3 draft that I just finished. It just completed, and I will be doing these recaps throughout the offseason. If you want to see a previous recap number 1, you can go to episode 15 on the YouTube channel. And then if you want to hear my most recent podcast, episode 18, that was with Sam Chowdhury of FTN Fantasy. And Sam and I discussed week 17 matchups and some of the weather that might be involved with these matchups, some players we were fading or raising up in our rankings just based on knowing these playoff matchups. So make sure that you check out that podcast, episode 18, talking about our week 17 matchups. I know those are 7 months away, but it is very important for us to keep those days in mind. December 29th, January 1st of 2023 will be some pretty important days for those competing in the Best Ball Mania 3 tournament. So tonight, I'm going to be recapping the Best Ball Mania 3 draft that I started while I was in Chicago a couple weeks ago and now has just finished. And boy, did this one was a learning moment for me. So hopefully you can learn along with me. The draft I want to share with you. Let me go to the share screen and the tab. It was a 2-5-9-2 build. Okay, and I started with Patrick Mahomes and Tua Tagovailoa were my two quarterbacks. As you notice, Mahomes was 8-9 picks later after ADP, which I felt pretty good about at that moment when I drafted Mahomes. And same thing with Tua. Tua was almost a full round after ADP. So I felt great about my quarterbacks. And I had the 101 in this draft. So Jonathan Taylor, it's going to be my exposure to getting Jonathan Taylor. Okay. And notice my quarterbacks do not have the same bye weeks 8 and 11. So Jonathan Taylor at 101. At pick 24, I came back around in the second round and drafted Javonte Williams. And then at the 301, I took Leonard Fournette. Look, it was interchangeable. It doesn't really matter at that point. I guess I bumped up Javonte Williams ADP artificially, but I would be comfortable taking Fournette at the back end of the second round either way. He's a running back 1, and he's shown that over the last few seasons. Now, my third running back, Leonard Fournette. My fourth was Khalil Herbert at about ADP. And then fifth was Daryl Williams. 10 picks after ADP. I felt great about getting Daryl Williams because James Conner, the running back 1 on this Arizona team, he has shown a history of injury. He has a goal line role. And so I'm confident that Daryl Williams, if Conner goes out, gets a very high leverage role. And we also saw Williams be a running back 2 at times, have some spike weeks in Kansas City, be a pass catcher. So I'm pretty confident in getting Daryl Williams as my running back 3. Now, the problem with this build, and I look at this build and it kind of sets in and stinks with me a little bit, is I had to do some reaching for the Kansas City wide receivers, but I did get a few of them. Skyy Moore picked 72. Yes, so you can blame me for moving Skyy Moore up at ADP, but I was looking through, and we'll look at the draft board here shortly, but Skyy Moore was going to be the pick. I didn't think he would come back around to me in 23 picks. I didn't think he would be there at pick 93. Adam Thielen, I love getting the Adam Thielen pick at pick 73. I think he's a great wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 value back in the 6th round, the 7th round. And I did reach on Marquez Valdes-Scantling as well, about 9 picks. Less than 12 picks, though, and that seems to be the threshold that Hayden Winks has put out. If you reach 12 picks or more, 25% of the time or more, you start to see significant decrease in the ceiling of your players. And so that's why I was conscious of what players are falling to me, what values can I get. And yes, I may have reached on a couple players, but I also allowed value to come to me other places. So for instance, I made back a lot of the value for Hunter Renfrow, right? I could have taken Renfrow at 96 instead of Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but I took him at 97 instead at that turn. I needed a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, and that's what Hunter Renfrow is going to provide you this year is wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 stats, and he's going to be competing with Devontae Park or Devontae Adams and Darren Waller. So he's the third pass catcher on this team, but he's still going to provide some usefulness given that Derek Carr has looked his way often the last couple of years. We've seen Hunter Renfrow be very fantasy useful, and to get him at an 11 pick discount, I'll take that all day. Another value, Jamison Williams. If this team makes the playoffs, which it may or may not, Jamison Williams is one of those players that I think at the end of the day is going to be one of those spike week candidates near the end of the season. Looking at what Detroit, is matching up in week 17, they're in a dome against Chicago at home. And Jamison Williams, week 17, he's a full year removed from the ACL tear. He'll have gotten the practice reps in the mid-season. He'll have gotten his groove, found his role on the outside, and this could be a wheels up game smash for Jamison Williams. That's what I'm banking on. And to get him at a 4 or 5 spot discount, that was pretty nice. And then Kenny Galladay. I recognized that my running backs were very strong, as given that my first 3 picks were running backs, and that Kenny Galladay, I needed to get more wide receivers. So as you could tell, this is not your typical 2-5-9-2 build. My 9th wide receiver, I just kept taking wide receivers. And Kenny Galladay is one of those players that I thought maybe he can reclaim some of the ceiling that he lost in previous years. So, I don't have a strong take on Kenny Galladay. He's probably going to be a 20 to 22% target share type of wide receiver, increasing his touchdowns. He can't get lower than the 0 touchdowns he scored last season for the New York Giants. So I think it's a bit of a bounce back year for Kenny Galladay. Alec Pierce, once again, a value at 168. And then I did reach for a bit at Justin Ross, but it's Kansas City stacking with Patrick Mahomes, number 1. And number 2 is we're near the end of the draft. We're at pick 192. My next pick would have been, so 193 was Daryl Williams, 192 Justin Ross. I didn't pick again until 216, right? So Cedric Wilson was my pick at 216 in the 20th round, my 19th round pick, Justin Ross. And the reason why I chose Cedric Wilson was because, twofold. One, he's one of, I think 7 or 8 players over the last couple seasons to have increased his wide receiver 1 rate each of those seasons. There are only a few players to have done that, and Cedric Wilson is one of them. And he goes to a team where Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle will be your wide receivers 1 and 2, but the wide receiver 3 spot is very much open. Cedric Wilson signed to a contract. He's shown some spike weeks when he was on Dallas, and he gets a 10-12% target share. But if either of those wide receivers are hurt, Cedric Wilson steps into a very large wide receiver role that's meaningful for fantasy and that that the coaches are going to get him involved in. So Cedric Wilson, pick 216, very last round for me. But I think he's one of those players that you want to be rotating in the 18th round of your drafts. Cedric Wilson, Miami. He's not left for dead, in my opinion. And then my 2 tight ends. George Kittle was 4 or so picks after ADP, and then Cole Kmet was right at ADP, about a pick or so. George Kittle, we've seen what spike weeks he's had. He's a tight end 1 for sure, one of those top 5s, and I was able to get him in the 5th round. That's pretty nice. And then Cole Kmet, I'm taking a lot of Kmet. I know that he hasn't spiked previously, but he's one of those players that in full PPR leagues, I think I'm leaning even more into, but I'll take a shot on Cole Kmet. I went with only 2 tight ends and 2 quarterbacks given the build that I had. Now let's turn the page to the draft board. So I'm going to share the draft board here so we can take a look together at what the board looks like. As I mentioned, I had the 101 in this draft. And if you have the 101 in your drafts, unless it's a super flex league, you should be drafting Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is the only exposure you're going to get of him. Uh, so drafting him makes sense there. And if he has a good year, yay, you've got him. If he doesn't have a good year, well, then you're protected because he's going as the 101. After that, Cooper Kupp, Christian McCaffrey went off the board. That's not surprising. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Derrick Henry. Looking at Stephon Diggs at the 1-7, that's a little surprising in the first round. But, and to not get Josh Allen, that's a little surprising. I know that he was sniped on him, but Josh Allen should be the target if you have Stephon Diggs for these stackable pieces. Austin Eckler at the 1-8, Najee Harris at the 1-9, Adams, Cook, Mike Evans sneaks into the first round. Love to see it. And then Aaron Jones at the 2-1. The Pack fan took Aaron Jones at the 2-1. I need to talk to the Pack fan, given my Bakhtiari and Aaron Jones love, and my Lazard jersey and Tunyon jersey behind me. But Aaron Jones going at the 2-1, that's a little early, in my opinion. Mike Evans at the 1-12, also a little early. I don't hate those picks, but they're not the values that you want to be taking. I know it's stretching at the turn, but you just want to take the values there. Like, give me Kelsey even at the 110, or even at the turn. Like this Pack fan turned down Travis Kelsey, turned down Joe Mixon, 2 players that I'm pretty confident drafting at this spot. Now, another surprise is Mark Andrews right off the bat after Travis Kelsey. 16th overall, Mark Andrews. I haven't done the projections yet. I am going to do live projections with each of the teams, and I'm going to have these study halls where I show you what I'm thinking and what decisions I'm making, and maybe I change my mind throughout. It's a process. I want to pull back the veil, for my projections. So I think I haven't done the projections yet, but Mark Andrews is one of those players that I'm concerned his target share won't increase very much, and the touchdowns may go down relative to last year. Okay. Next up, so we're looking CeeDee Lamb, Deebo Samuel, unsurprising. Swift, not surprising. I'm comfortable taking DeAndre Swift in the 15-16 range. All right. I'm even comfortable taking Swift ahead of Dalvin Cook. That's how confident I am in the DeAndre Swift role in Detroit and his talent as well. Alvin Kamara at the 2-9, not surprising. Hill and Brown. And this explains why I went with Javonte and Fournette. There were significant tier breaks for the wide receiver position. I would have had to select Michael Pittman and T. Higgins, or T. Higgins and Kyle Pitts, or Josh Allen at these spots. I think it was a significant tier drop from Javonte Williams and Leonard Fournette to James Conner and Saquon Barkley for the running back position. And I got sniped on Tyreek Hill and A.J. Brown at the wide receiver spots. I'm comfortable taking A.J. Brown at the 2-12 or the 3-1. Same thing with Tyreek Hill. Those are players that I would have liked to get there and would have been better for my build, but unfortunately it didn't happen. So, it's just the reality of what it is. Yeah, so some aggressive drafters in the back end of this draft. I agree. We'll get to those in a bit, but 1912 Fantasy, I appreciate you jumping in, and we'll keep going here. I appreciate you noticing that. I'll make some comments about the rest of Pack Fan as we move along and looking at this board. Okay, so I felt it was suboptimal positionally to take Javonte Williams and Leonard Fournette at those 212 and 3-1 spots. But I also felt I was kind of put into that position because of the tier breaks at running back and wide receiver, and I wasn't willing to pull the trigger on Kyle Pitts at the 212 or 3-1. Um, I've cooled on Pitts a little bit, but I was I was pretty high on T. Higgins and Kyle Pitts in the big board draft. I was getting them consistently at the 212, 3-1, but I'm letting them slip a little bit. And I think that there was just a tier break for the running backs as well. Um, so Connor Barkley goes off, Michael Pittman goes off, Josh Allen, Pitts, Higgins. There were a lot of wide receivers that went off at this point. Yeah, Jose, I'll look at which other teams I liked in this draft in just a little bit. But yes, there. I don't know if there were teams that I liked, but I wasn't feeling great about mine. I love the running backs and the quarterback and the tight end. I was happy about, but the wide receivers, I feel like I needed to take shots on upside. So hopefully they're able to manage it for me. Um, there aren't a lot of surprises here in the third round, wide receiver wise. Looking at the fourth round, Ezekiel Elliott went a little early, in my opinion, at the 4-3. I'm not comfortable taking Ezekiel Elliott until the fifth round. He's been consistently going to that spot, though. Looking at the rest of the players, Chris Godwin at the 4-7, I can't get behind that. Unless you have Tom Brady as your quarterback or you have a Tampa Bay correlation going, Chris Godwin cannot be drafted in the fourth round. He should be a more seventh round consideration. So I don't like that pick by Surly Badger. That's a pretty bad one, in my opinion. Looking at the rest of the fourth round, I like the Breece Hall pick at 4-6. I don't like Amari Cooper at the back end of the fourth round. I'm kind of upset that Cortland Sutton didn't come back to me at the end of the fourth round. I like getting Sutton at the beginning of the fifth, but it didn't happen. And then I also noticed that there was a pretty significant tier break for tight end. Like Darren Waller went off at the 4-1, but George Kittle didn't get drafted. I took him at the 5-1. He was falling. So I picked up the value where I could. And I hope it's enough value to make up for the reaches I had to make later on in the draft to get at least some of the stack happening. Looking at the fifth round, Dobbins goes off. That's fine. Allen Robinson, I've had mixed feelings about him. I've seen him go in the sixth round, and I probably wouldn't be comfortable taking him until the sixth round. But this is where things start getting a little ludicrous for me. Gabriel Davis is going ahead of Brandon Cooks. I can't get behind that. I simply can't get behind Gabriel Davis, even in the fifth round, going ahead of Brandon Cooks. It shouldn't happen. I mean, looking at what kind of wide receivers you're getting in the sixth round, at least B Park came back and got Elijah Moore in the sixth round because that's, I think, a plus EV pick. The same thing with Drake London. Like, I think there's some upside wide receivers with these plays, but also there's some downside with what Amari Cooper could happen with the Deshaun Watson situation. So there's risk involved with some of these players. I do like EJ Bentley stacking Lamar Jackson with Rashad Bateman and also getting Mark Andrews. So this was an intentional Baltimore stack. So far, EJ Bentley, I like that stack. I'm not a fan of Najee Harris or DJ Moore at those spots. Like, give me Mike Williams ahead of DJ Moore. And there's no reason in these types of drafts, like Mike Williams went at the 310. He should be going ahead of Keenan Allen. He should have gone ahead of Keenan Allen at this spot, behind T. Higgins, of course. But yeah, let's keep looking. So far, EJ Bentley's team, I really like. Started with a running back 1, didn't take another running back till Miles Sanders, James Cook, Isaiah Spiller. Now I'm just going to start getting into some of the builds. Okay. So looking at 3 of the first 4 picks were wide receivers for Ill Sauce, and then J.K. Dobbins, Russell Wilson to stack with Cortland Sutton, Aaron Rodgers later on. I don't see any stackable pieces with Aaron Rodgers, so that take that back. Christian Watson is there. The 1-3, Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, Amari Cooper, Allen Robinson, Drake London. I like those. I love getting A.J. Dillon in the 7th round. That's a smash pick for me, and I'm glad he went ahead of Kenneth Walker. The pass catching upside for Dillon, plus the goal line, plus if Aaron Jones gets hurt, look out. A.J. Dillon becomes a running back 1 in that like Najee Harris, Austin Eckler range. So I love grabbing A.J. Dillon, especially in 0 RB builds. A.J. Dillon is the type of player that you want to get him and Kareem Hunt. Those are the 2 running backs I'm targeting in 0 RB builds. But this one was bully running back, I guess, to start. Okay. Looking at Fold My Socks, went Jefferson, Pittman, DK. Love getting DK at the back end of the 4th. Treylon Burks to pair with Kamara, Montgomery, Damian Harris. Kirk Cousins, we get the Jefferson stack. Also some correlation, Alexander Madison as well. They still haven't fixed Robbie's name. It's Robbie Anderson. I usually take like an Amir Smith Marset or a KJ Osborne too, if I can get something there. Jamar Chase, Nick Chubb, Josh Allen, Gabe Davis. I guess it's a stack, with Josh Allen. Still, Gabriel Davis is a stretch here. I'm not a fan of it. The Dalton Schultz, Dak Prescott. That has to be my favorite. Like, he comes back with a really bad stack with one of my favorite stacks. Dalton Schultz in the 7th, Dak Prescott in the 8th. Dak Prescott, over the last 3 seasons, has his 73rd percentile weekly outcome be 25 points or more. The only other quarterback to do that, Patrick Mahomes. So you're getting significant upside with Dak Prescott in the 8th round. I love it. I love it. And Dalton Schultz is probably going to be the second pass catcher on this team. Now, he does come back with one of the fades. If you want to check out my YouTube channel, I do talk about Michael Gallup in short. Where is it? In short number 8 on my YouTube channel. It's a minute long, and I talk about how Michael Gallup is one of the fades in the 10th round and my reasoning behind that. So check that out. It's about 70 seconds of your life if you want more on that. Okay, I'm not a fan, even with the stack. Like, the team is banking on they're making it to the playoffs, and Michael Gallup's going to be useful for them and fully healed. There's just a lot of ifs with that Michael Pittman pick. Looking the rest of the way, love Marvin Jones. And the 15th round, can't go wrong there. Logan Thomas, Washington has one of the best tight end playoff matchups that you can have, and Logan Thomas should be healthy by that time. He tore his ACL mid-season, should be back by that point. He doesn't really have a lot of tight end competition there. The Washington football team, now the Commanders, did draft another tight end, but they take a while to get together. So I'm not too worried about that. And then Josh Allen, Isaiah McKenzie in the 18th round. So that's a nice little rotation to go through. McKenzie is an 18th round pick. If you have Justin Fields, like this Fold My Socks does, Byron Pringle is a good 18th round stack piece. Looking at, I mentioned I kind of badgered on Surly Badger, but I did like DeAndre Swift coming back around. I don't like the Derrick Henry pick mid 1-6. I prefer Eckler over a Henry, even in a half-point PPR. There's a lot of risk with Henry, in my opinion. Kyle Pitts in the mid 3rd round. That's fine at that point. I wasn't willing to push the draft button on Pitts at the end of the second, beginning of third right now. Darnell Mooney is an interesting player. Derek Carr at the 9-6, but not stacking with anyone. Just he's a naked Derek Carr. And I don't see any other stackable pieces. Matt Ryan in Indy, Zach Wilson, New York Jets. I'm scrolling through and I'm struggling to find any stacks. I see a couple correlations like Damian Pierce with Houston and also Brandon Cooks with Houston, but not really excited about Surly Badger here. Looking at Gill, 3 straight wide receivers, Diggs, Samuel, T. Higgins. That's fine start for me. Breece Hall, love it. Jerry Jeudy, hate it. Even in the 5th round. Jerry Jeudy, though, his ADP is dropping. Finally, thank you. His ADP is dropping. Courtland Sutton is getting drafted ahead of Jerry Jeudy, which is what it was supposed to be, but now it's around a half a round, if not a little bit more. I would expect Jerry Jeudy's ADP to continue to fall. And if it does, that's when I'll start taking Jeudy. I still have Courtland Sutton ahead of Jeudy in my ranks, but boy, oh boy. Yeah, I'm still not a fan of Jeudy at that price point. Jalen Hurts. Yes, sir. Jalen Hurts did go ahead of Joe Burrow. And I've been talking about that for the last 3 weeks or so. Jalen Hurts ahead of Joe Burrow. Jalen Hurts went behind Tom Brady and Kyler Murray, though. But for good reason. The Tom Brady team took Mike Evans round 1. So there was a little bit of push in there. Okay. Looking at the rest of it, the stack Devonta Smith with Jalen Hurts. If you haven't checked out my tweet on that I sent out earlier today, I made the visual argument that it's AJ Brown clearly over Devonta Smith. Like over the last 3 years, AJ Brown's 84th percentile weekly outcome has always superseded the 84th percentile outcome that Devonta Smith showed his rookie year. So I'm still convinced AJ Brown is going to be the wide receiver 1. Let's not get carried away with the camp news. Dallas Goedert. So it's a triplet of Philadelphia stack here. Hurts, Smith, Goddard, which seems to be about right. Not uncommon. Trey Lance. So those rushing quarterbacks. Hugh Gill. Getting those rushing quarterbacks. And you only need 2. You need Lance and you need Jalen Hurts. Gesicki, I don't see the stack there, but maybe it was a value pick. I do have Gesicki over Knox for right now. That's not what I'm strong on, but I do see the upside that Gesicki is more sticky than Dawson Knox's. Ronald Jones in the 11th round. This is where I'm glad I wasn't needing to pick off running backs, because these backup running backs in the 11th round, this feels like the dead zone of running back. Like you don't want to be picking in the 11th round your running back if you need like a running back 2 or a running back 3. 10th round, early 10th round, Chase Edmonds, end of the 9th round, Kareem Hunt for reference. But Ronald Jones in the 11th round feels like a wasted pick, in my opinion. Jamison Crowder, I'd rather have at the 11th round, or even an Isaiah Spiller. Isaiah Spiller could be a higher leverage role, looking horizontally at this draft. Okay. Rob Gronkowski went off the 11-12. I like his value there, and it was the stackable piece with Tom Brady. So PackFan got a lot of high upside plays and really leaned into that Tampa Bay set of stacks. But I am concerned with some of the lost value. So, for instance, like I like getting Evans there, but I'm not a fan of the Aaron Jones pick. That's a little early for value-wise. Deontay Johnson is fine. Darren Waller was probably a pick a half a round early. Josh Jacobs going around Antonio Gibson is fine, but I'm sure he's kicking himself because Travis Etienne went at the 5'11". Woof. The 5'11 for Travis Etienne. I love getting Etienne mid 5th round, even early 5th round. In a dynasty startup, I got Travis Etienne at the 5.5. It was a super flex, but still at the 5.5, Travis Etienne was hanging out, and all I had to do was trade my 5.12 and a second round pick, future second, to get Travis Etienne and move up and make sure that I got him. So yeah, I'm wheels up with Travis Etienne. Plus, in that dynasty league, I had Trevor Lawrence as well. So there's a stackable piece. Nevertheless, let's focus back on here. DeAndre Hopkins going at pick 80. I will be comfortable taking Hopkins after pick 80. Okay, so this is about where ADP is, and there's no Kyler Murray. He's just hanging out there. There's no week 17 correlation because Arizona plays Atlanta. So I don't see a lot of love there. There's injuries and suspensions on this team. There's not a lot of stacking with winner, chicken dinny. I think dinner. Yeah, I don't know if winner, chicken dinner is going to be, the right the winner here, just because he chose Mike Williams over Keenan Allen, right? You have the Eckler pick, which is nice, and CeeDee Lamb pick, which is nice, but you've got floor with CeeDee Lamb. Go with the spike week of Mike Williams. Let's take a pause. Keenan Allen had 0 wide receiver 1 weeks. Like, he may have been like the wide receiver 11 or 12 or whatever on the week, but a 24.7 PPR fantasy points. He had 0 games meeting that threshold. And that's on average like the wide receiver 6 on a week. He had 0 boom weeks like that. He was consistently a wide receiver 2. Why are you drafting a wide receiver 2 when Mike Williams is up there where 15% of the time, 16% of the time, he was a wide receiver 1? You're not going for consistency here, especially when you're going to get the Justin Herbert in the end of the 5th round to stack. Go for it. Like, go for the ceiling. Do not be afraid, right? Trust these big time offenses to bring you fantasy goodness. Okay. Don't draft Keenan Allen over Mike Williams. You have that possibility of the stack anyways. So go for it. Yeah, so I'm not liking winner, chicken dinner. There were just some crucial mispicks there. Yeah, after the draft, would you have made any changes? Yeah, so I would have looked at probably more week 17 correlation, like getting some of the New England players, or I was so heavily with Kansas City and they faced Denver. So maybe getting some of the Denver picks in there as well. Looking where like Tim Patrick went. So Tim Patrick went. I'm failing to find him. Yeah, at the 11-2. I probably should have taken Tim Patrick over Kenny Galladay. That should have been a pick for that week 17 correlation. I feel like reaching on Skyy more still, like, the trouble was, if you're gonna go 0 wide receiver like I did through the first 5 rounds, like, you have to get the value, and I felt like I got value with Patrick Mahomes and I got value with George Kittle. Both of them were combined. Well, let me pull it up. Mahomes was 9 picks after ADP, and Kittle was 4 or 5 picks after ADP. So I got a full round of ADP back, give or take. But for build sake, I should have taken T. Higgins over Leonard Fournette, which feels bad because there's such a teardrop from AJ Brown. I feel like I got a little unlucky on this spot, and I did the best I could. But reaching there, I got Thielen, and I didn't see a lot of other like upside wide receivers that I didn't want to reach too much further on. Like Tyler Lockett would have been, I think, a more upside wide receiver, but he went to the 8-3. Compare that to Skyy Moore, who went to the 6-12. Like, I think that Tyler Lockett has much more upside and would be a better wide receiver overall. But with the Kansas City stack and how high the Skyy Moore is going, that's one of the problems. So, I kind of fell into taking some Kansas City despite other players that I wasn't a fan of. Like, I wasn't gonna take 2 tight ends. Like, I wasn't gonna take Hawkinson and Kittle. Might as well just wait a while and take Cole Kmet. So I feel like I tried to manage the best I could with it. I did end up getting 9 wide receivers out of this, but looking at maybe instead of Kittle, I could have taken. But that's the thing. I got sniped on Cortland Sutton. That's a teardrop for me. I kept getting sniped by Illsauce as I came around. So like AJ Brown was a teardrop for me. Cortland Sutton, teardrop wide receiver for me. Drake London was a teardrop wide receiver for me. You can clearly see Mooney, Moore, Burks, London, and then yeah, so the wide receivers did not fall my way in this draft, which is why I had to piecemeal it with more spiky wide receivers and stacking. So I leaned into that more. I did the best I could, I suppose. Like Alec Pierce was a value at that point. Yeah, give me an ambiguous Alec Pierce. I haven't done second round wide receiver upside study, but I did do a first round wide receiver upside study, and I posted that on Twitter. A short little study of what are you getting upside wise at 84th percentile or higher, and the upside that you were getting was the equivalent of like a wide receiver 24 upside. The 24th best upside wide receiver. Okay. For these first round wide receivers. I haven't done second round, as I said, but that's going to be for future projects. So yeah, I think that yeah, there were some picks here that that's the struggle with the 101 as well. Like I had to take Jonathan Taylor at the 1. Like in how the flow of this went, I was kind of pigeoned into an awkward build because of the spot and the snipes. So, you can't win them all, and this one is probably not going to be in it. It has like soured on me because I know that there's some minus EV selections, despite some plus EV selections. Like I was able to get Hunter Renfrow 11 spots after ADP. I was able to get Tua 12 spots after ADP. And stacking him week 17 with Cedric Wilson, that might be interesting. Mahomes was 8-9 picks after ADP. So I tried to take the value where I could because I kept getting sniped is what what I'm getting at. So yeah, I appreciate 1912 Fantasy. You're forcing me to do some reflection here. It was, as I admit, the output looks a little awkward, but I wasn't willing to veer from taking value where I could, given the visual teardrop. Now maybe I went, I should have taken a Michael Pittman, and that would have solidified me as a wide receiver 1. But that's the thing, is I don't think Michael Pittman has a lot of access to wide receiver 1, compared to like Mike Williams. So if you want a wide receiver 1 upside, Mike Williams probably has that in half PPR. T. Higgins probably has that. So could I have gone T. Higgins there? That's a possibility. I was taking him earlier in that in the big board drafts in February. So maybe that would have shifted things for me. Did I go to Chiefs heavy on wide receivers? Look, some of these wide receivers are going to pop off. and getting Skyy Moore, MVS, and Justin Ross. This is going to be week 17. And we know MVS has an injury history. I also have been avoiding Juju Smith-Schuster and Mecole Hardman. Juju because of the value, and Hardman because I don't think Hardman is very good, to be completely honest with you. Um, let me pull up. I just did as I said, I've had some studies done with uh, these wide receivers, and yeah, I got into a little bit of a few Twitter feuds today, but that's okay. Let me share the screen instead so I can speak about these Chiefs wide receivers. Okay. So let me zoom in as well. Which veteran wide receiver has the best upside? It seems that Juju and MVS have similar half PPR upside. Why not take MVS at 100.4 instead of Juju at 55.9? So my argument is that MVS has very similar upside to Juju Smith-Schuster, at least based on what we've seen over the last 3 years, and that Mecole Hardman is not going to be the answer. So looking at Juju, right? So the way we want to interpret this is a distribution half point PPR, a half point PPR fantasy point distribution. This is the density. Okay. You can think of it as like a cumulative probability. So looking at the red line, that's 2019, right? Juju Smith-Schuster, his 84th percentile outcome. This is the red line that goes down right here. That is kind of what you can think of as upside. Okay. And the upside here is at like 15 points or so. So that was Juju in 2019. In 2020, that's the blue line. That was his healthy year 2 years ago. He was just about 21 points or so. That's the blue. And then orange, remember last year, injury riddled, was like 11. So not very high upside. Okay. Now, so 21. So he went from 15 to 21 to 11. Whereas Marquez Valdes-Scantling, looking at these 84th percentile outcomes, 2019, it was like 8 or 9. So not very good. But that was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 2019. In 2020, that was the blue. He was at like 19, 18 and a half, 19 PPR or half PPR points was his 84th percentile outcome. So we're once again talking about ceiling. What kind of ceiling can Marquez Valdes-Scantling access? And over the last 3 years, so blue is like 19, 18, 19, and then the orange is at like 17, 16, 16, 17, somewhere around there. And then so it's obvious that MVS didn't quite get to where Juju was, but it's pretty close. And Juju has been less consistent over the last 2 years. And then this is Mecole Hardman. Now, what you'll notice is that Mecole Hardman, all of his 84th percentile outcomes are really tightly knit together. That's how you know that there's something consistent happening here. They're tightly knit. They're close together. They don't deviate very far apart. We have a lot of data on Mecole Hardman, and the data suggests that his upside is very limited. We're looking at like 12, 13, maybe 14 is his 84th percentile outcome possible spike weeks. So 13, 14, 15, compare that to like 17 to 19 for Marquez Valdes-Scantling and like 16 to 21 for Juju. So no, Mecole Hardman is not the answer. I've been avoiding, and also avoiding Juju just because of the price, because they're virtually the same. So if I wanted Kansas City wide receivers, taking a shot on him. Why did I choose Justin Ross as well? Justin Ross, there's possibilities. We don't know if he's good. We don't know if he's bad. We don't know if he'll be healthy. He could be rotating as the wide receiver too. Okay. We don't know. But I felt like I needed to get a lead wide receiver for Skyy Moore. So I did bite into that a little bit, but he was just, he wouldn't have come back to me like because of I'm at the turn. So am I a little heavy? Yeah, I think I'm a little heavy, but Ross could be a 0. And like looking at who else is in at the 17th round, like Kendrick Bourne maybe would be interesting, but wouldn't have fit my build. There aren't a lot of other Miami wide receivers, maybe New England, the correlation with Miami, but I hadn't had any other picks at that point. Yeah. So looking at the rest of the draft, I think I'm all set on these looking at the draft. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's not going to be my favorite team. I'm definitely having more favorite teams. But just to recap, for those who tuned in, this is a Best Ball Mania 3 draft that I did, slow draft, that I started in Chicago over the course of 2.5 weeks. And I went Jonathan Taylor, Javonte Williams, Leonard Fournette, Patrick Mahomes, George Kittle, Skyy Moore, Adam Thielen, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Hunter Renfrow, Jamison Williams, Kenny Galladay, Tua, Cole Kmet, Alec Pierce, Khalil Herbert, Justin Ross, Daryl Williams, and Cedric Wilson to round out the 18th round. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Make sure that you're subscribed to the Best Bell Fantasy Football Podcast. Give a like, subscribe, give 5-star rating on the Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Appreciate all the support and the comments jumping in. Yeah. And tomorrow, a special FFPC draft with Adam Krautwurst is queued up. So check that out. The league live number is 41115. We're going to be drafting at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. There's 9 spots left. It's actually filling pretty quickly because I just joined a couple hours ago. So make sure that you check that out. I agree, 1912 Fantasy, it's tough with that one spot. Like, you hope that the value comes to you because, as you saw, I would have been happy with Tyreek Hill there. I would have been happy getting AJ Brown there. Those are the type of wide receivers who have wide receiver 1 upside. It just, you love to see those types of wide receivers getting there, but they didn't for me. And the same thing with like Cortland Sutton coming back around. So I agree with you, 1912 Fantasy. It is a real tough spot. You could be really screwed if you get the 101 in these spots, or you could be put in a tough situation like I did. Like, I can't pass up value, right? If I passed up Patrick Mahomes, I would have allowed someone else to get Mahomes later on in the 5th round who didn't deserve him, number one. And number two, there wasn't anyone really plus EV that I saw that could be my wide receiver 1. Like maybe Brandon Cooks, but you're really going to tell me you're going to let Patrick Mahomes drop 9-10 spots to draft Brandon Cooks as your wide receiver 1? Maybe that's the more optimized way of drafting it. But no, I think that, yeah, that was tough. Maybe that Brandon Cooks spot at the 5-1 could have been a thing, but we'll leave it at that. Tomorrow, as I said, 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Check out the FFPC live draft. I'll be drafting live on here with Adam. It's going to be a lot of fun. Best ball tournament, so it's a $125 entry, pretty high roller. It's in fact, I think one of the biggest entries that I've entered. So I'll be taking that pretty seriously. I'll have all of my data up. It'll be great jumping on with Adam and talking some best ball. I appreciate that. And thank you, 1912 Fantasy. You're very kind. I appreciate your support and comments and pushing me to do reflection here. So thank you everyone for popping in. Jose, 1912 Fantasy, and everyone else. Thank you so much and good luck in the best ball streets. We'll see you tomorrow.